Right then, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to part 4 of How Strong Are DnD Adventurers. Technically, we are still in Tier 3 for the first part of this video, but we'll be covering Tier 4 up to level 20 and the levels of power beyond that. A final game for you viewers. Where in this tier would you place these following characters? Number 1, lore-accurate Dragonborn from Skyrim. Number 2, Link from Legend of Zelda, we'll say Breath of the Wild. Number 3, the Ashen One from Dark Souls 3. And number 4, Freerun from Freerun. For the setting, as we stated in the previous video, the wizard may have uncovered a new threat to all of existence. We'll say that a demon lord like Orcus has begun an invasion of the material plane, while a planar war rages across the various planes of reality. Even as powerful as you are at level 15, you aren't strong enough to stop this invasion. You'll need to ascend to tier 4, where your main concern will no longer be doing simple quests for gold, or exploring dungeons and dealing with local threats. It will be to gather the most powerful legendary items and artifacts you can in order to give you a fighting chance against what is to come. One last thing I should have done in the last video is given our fighter his eye back, the one that he lost in the second video. This is because at these levels, finding a cleric with the regenerate spell becomes much more likely, and although that isn't a passive regeneration effect like Wolverine, it does mean that as long as they have access to a healer with that kind of magic, they can restore missing body parts, so if your arm gets chopped off, you can heal it back. Level 16. This is the level where you like and subscribe, and hit the bell icon to stay updated. And this is the actual end of tier 3, not level 14 as I said in the last video. We'll say you reach this level after defeating the first wave of the demon invasion, perhaps taking down a Baylor general in the process. You could also have defeated a Lich, as those are often under the patronage of Orcus. Perhaps one of the dragons from the previous video has become a Draco-Lich and seeks revenge against the party. Whatever you choose to go for, this level will be reached after the first minor victory against this new threat. This level also comes with another ability score increase. By this point, you probably have a 20 in multiple stats, so choosing a feat is likely the best option. But in the last video, I put into perspective what having 20 strength is like, basically allowing you to run around carrying more weight than an Olympic strongman can lift. So, let's have a look at intelligence. Our wizard certainly has 20 intelligence by now, probably had it many levels ago. And they may even have higher than 20 intelligence with certain items. So what does that look like compared to an average human? Well, there's several ways of going about it, but honestly the simplest way is to measure it like this. A commoner, aka an average human, has 10 intelligence. The average person in the real world has an IQ of 100. So, if you directly compare 10 intelligence to 100 IQ, that basically means having 20 intelligence is the equivalent of having 200 IQ, which is about 60 points above genius level. Now, IQ isn't exactly the most accurate measurement of intelligence, but to be honest, trying to quantify intelligence is really difficult to do, because unlike strength, you aren't really lifting hard numbers with your mind, unless you use telekinesis. As for the other attributes, well, you can't really quantify any of those either. A character with 20 con at level 8 is still less tanky than a character with 20 con at level 16. I suppose, just like with intelligence, the simplest way to look at it is to see what the average person is capable of with each of these attributes and double it, as a commoner has 10 in every attribute. So whatever the average human can endure with 10 constitution, someone with 20 can endure twice as much, whether that be how much force it takes to knock them out or break their bones, or how much out-of-date food they can eat before getting ill, or even how much booze they can drink before getting drunk. Level 17. Now you're actually in tier 4. At this point, you are approaching the level of being one of the best of your class in the entire world. I'd like to imagine that our fighter, rogue, and wizard have powerful apprentices of their own, maybe around the level 8 to 10 range, and will probably need them to be in charge of their own operations or holdings, because with the threats our heroes will be facing, they will not have time to be running things back home. Though it is important to note, every level at this point, there's probably multiple years between them, and I would honestly say getting close to this level you probably don't have enough time in your life as a regular human to reach this level in the first place. There could be decades between these levels right here. Now, we'll say, because obviously our humble fighter and rogue do need to make it to level 20, that they are kind of being bolstered by external powers, magic items, blessings, boons, all these types of things. Our wizard, well, it is possible for a wizard to live for a few hundred years without becoming a lich, due to their mastery of magic, and also potentially becoming like a chosen of Mystra, which at this level could be on the cards for our wizard. For all classes, your proficiency bonus increases to +6, which is the maximum it will ever reach. I like to think of this as you are now as good as you will ever get, either mentally or physically, in your field. Sure, you will still be able to learn new spells as a wizard, or 1 or 2 new abilities as a fighter or rogue, but your fundamentals are as good as they will ever be. You've effectively achieved mastery of your craft. To illustrate this further, full casters can now cast 9th level spells. Only 1 per day, but these are the peak of spell casting. Our wizard can cast spells that can alter time, like Time Stop or Time Ravage, which ages a target to a point where they only have 30 days left to live at most. Like, imagine that, they just cast this spell on you, you become a really, really old man, and you have less than a month to live. There are also spells like Invulnerability, which makes you immune to all damage for 10 minutes. Meaning, for this duration, even Goku couldn't harm you. How a word kill is a difficult one to scale, because it can instantly kill an Archmage with 99 HP, but couldn't affect a Hobgoblin Warlord, which is only a CR6 with 112 HP. So it's kind of inconsistent, but it is a very dangerous spell, because it effectively means if you're fighting something that can cast this, you can just remove 100 hit points from however many hit points you have, because the minute you get below 100, you're dead. Then there's also Meteor Swarm, which can obliterate a town, or Psychic Scream, which can explode the minds of your enemies. But the most powerful spell of all time that wizards can now cast is Wish. There are some limitations to this spell, like the chance of you only ever being able to cast it once, but literally being able to wish for almost anything you could imagine is extremely powerful. Now, normally the spell is used to regain spell slots, being able to cast another 9th level spell, granting yourself near infinite wealth, but you could also potentially wish for a legendary item that is the exact item that you need. Like a Holy Avenger would be really nice right about now, to be dealing with these demonic hordes. Clerics can cast 9th level spells like True Resurrection, which can revive anyone who has been dead for less than 200 years, even providing them with an entirely new body if their old one doesn't exist. Fighters can now use Action Surge twice and Indomitable 3 times, and Rogue Sneak Attack is now 9d6, which is incredibly high, but like I said in our last video, our poor non-casters are really starting to fall behind. There's a reason almost all of the powerful lore characters in D&D are wizards. Level 18. At this level, our rogue gets elusive, which means they are so alert and evasive that it is impossible for any attack to ever have advantage against them while they remain conscious. Fighters get basically nothing at all, but our wizard can now be considered an Archmage. What does this mean? Well, Archmages vary in power and level of skill, but more or less you are the authority on magic within a certain field or area. You could be the absolute authority on magic for your kingdom, a whole empire, an order of mages, or even your whole world. I like to think that each Archmage within a certain world is a master of the different schools of magic, so you could have an Archmage who is the authority on abjuration magic, and another who is the authority on illusion magic, etc. I'd also give the wizard a Staff of the Magi and Robe of the Archmage at this point, as it seems fitting. Maybe they wished for these items. In terms of magical items, at this point, there are no staves or robes that our wizard can attain that will be more powerful than what he already possesses. We could also improve his Arcane Grimoire to a +3, or give him a +3 Wand of the War Mage. Either way, in terms of actual power, they're about as powerful as they will ever get. They can still learn new spells. Wizards never stop learning new spells after all. but they are already capable of casting the most powerful versions of the most powerful spells they know. As for our fighter and rogue, they'll be decked out entirely in +3 items right now. The fighter can keep his +3 Vorpal sword, but now has a +3 plate and a +3 shield, and would have a near endless supply of potions and elixirs like potions of strength, potions of resistance, potions of healing, etc., to help them close the gap between themselves and the powerful spellcasters they'll be up against. The rogue can replace its dagger of venom with a luck blade, which is one of the most powerful blades in D&D, as it allows the rogue to cast Wish once per day, and allows them to re-roll any attack roll, saving throw, or ability check. Pair this with some +3 studded leather armor of resistance, maybe fire or necrotic, as they're going to be fighting demons, and the rogue will be nigh untouchable. They can also have a whole bunch of utility potions, like potions of invisibility, speed, flight, etc. I like to think that you reach level 18 when you are ready to take the fight to Orcus, or whatever BBEG you're going for. Now, this could be on his home layer of Thanatos in the Abyss, as in the lore, level 20 parties have gone there to thwart his plans before, but they're never able to actually kill him on his own domain, as he's far too powerful even for level 20s. Instead, you may have defeated his main demonic generals like Glyphamore, his Baelor right hand, and now, as Orcus is summoned into your world, you are gathering your armies to send him back to the Abyss where he belongs. But you still have a long way to go, as even more of his elite demon and undead minions will be standing in your way, such as more liches and death knights. Now, your fighter at this point can go toe-to-toe with a Death Knight quite easily, but a Lich would be more than enough of a challenge even for your Wizard. You can go toe-to-toe with 9th level spells, but a Lich is essentially a Wizard that has gained immortality in Undeath, and therefore has had a lot longer time to study spells and will have just greater mastery of spells than your Wizard, even though you are both capable of the same tier of spellcasting. Level 19. One final ability score improvement or feat for our adventurers. You don't get much else at this level, but that's because there's not much else for you to learn. You have the best magic items you can realistically obtain, your martial skill is about as good as it can possibly be. When you were local heroes, you answered to your local lord or mayor. When you were heroes of the realm, you answered to the monarch of your kingdom, or to the general of its armies. When you were masters of the realm, you stood shoulder to shoulder with kings and emperors and generals. Now, you answer only to the gods, or to yourself. No kingdom can command you. You are too powerful and far too busy to run your own order, guild, academy, etc. You are a legendary figure within your world, and perhaps across the planes by now. All that is left is to defeat Orcus himself, or, if you're going for another example, perhaps an archdevil, an ancient red dragon like Cloth, or even an Empyrean trying to subjugate your world. Level 20. Here we are. It's been a ride, but this is more or less the end of the line for our adventurers. At this level, they will face down and probably defeat the Demon Lord, thwarting his invasion and preventing him from using your world to gain enough power to conquer all the planes of reality. Your actions now affect the multiverse. They ripple across the planes. You have the power to destabilize the cosmic balance of things. Now, Orcus will probably return, he has done before, but this brief power vacuum after you defeat him and weaken his armies will likely cause the other demon lords to start fighting over his layer of the abyss, and he may not have the power to stop them. And of course, the 9 hells might be moving in to try and take advantage of this internal fighting, and celestials and other planar entities will definitely be watching with great interest. Few creatures can challenge you now. Even the Tarask, the most powerful monster of the material plane, will likely fall if you work together against it. At this level, our wizard has the ability to cast signature spells without using spell slots. Now, to explain what a signature spell is, mechanically it just means that you can cast specific 3rd level or lower spells without needing to use a spell slot, but in the lore, I do believe a signature spell is essentially a spell that's probably named after your wizard. For example, Tasha, very famous witch or wizard, has spells like Tasha's Mind Whip, Tasha's Caustic Brew, etc. Those are her signature spells. So if our wizard has a name, let's call him Barry, he could have a spell that he's created, like Barry's Magic Missile, and that would be his signature spell that he can cast without needing to use spell slots. Our fighter can now make 4 attacks in a single turn, or 8 with Action Surge, and our rogue can automatically succeed on certain rolls. Paladins become divine avatars. Monks can empower themselves every time they roll initiative. Clerics can call for their god to intervene in their affairs and automatically succeed in doing so, as before, when they'd attempt this, there was only a small chance their god would actually intervene. Barbarians can increase their strength and constitution to 24, matching the might of some giants. Druids become archdruids, allowing them to wild shape as many times as they want, and can cast spells while in animal form. Warlocks can become Eldritch Masters and entreat their patron to restore their missing spell slots. Sorcerers restore their power much more easily. Rangers become even more proficient in taking down their favourite enemies. Bards fucking suck, and so on. Now, trying to research some lore characters to use for examples for each of the classes, I discovered that lore and mechanics vary wildly. Well, I already kind of knew that, but finding actual concrete feats for level 20 lore characters that aren't wizards or other powerful spellcasters like sorcerers is actually kind of difficult to do, as they don't really have feats per se. They have deeds, heroic deeds, like leading an army into battle or working with a group of other powerful individuals to take down a giant or dragon or demon. That's because D&D is a group-based game. You don't go around doing things by yourself with your own strength and skill. You rely on teamwork. And that's because a lot of the monsters in Dungeons & Dragons are far more powerful individually than the player characters. That's why you need a group of around 4, usually, player characters to take down something like a dragon. At this level, it is likely our fighter, and even a paladin, can't do much by themselves and must support their allies or lead armies of their own, whether it be the fighter riding at the head of their kingdom's armies, the paladin leading their order of knights into battle. Rogues would likely stick to the shadows, as they're not going to be that effective in combat. They can avoid damage and avoid danger, but they're going to be much better gathering information, trying to find ways to exploit the weaknesses of their foes. They could be the ones that discover a secret unguarded way into the Temple of Orcus, or maybe they find the weakness of the head cultist that they need to take out in order to prevent the ritual from succeeding. But really, the wizard is going to be the one hard carrying everyone else. Or the cleric. Level 20 clerics are mechanically incredibly powerful. Many of the examples I did find from the lore are either characters that are technically higher level than 20, or even approaching demigod status, or they don't really have feats. One of the most powerful barbarians, Uthgar, led many battles and slew a pale giant, but his true height of power came from him ascending to godhood. Then you have Obold Many-Arrows, a powerful orcish barbarian king and exarch of Grumsh, but he's only listed as a CR 9 in 3rd edition. This is the same edition that goes way beyond CR 30 for some other characters, even though Obold is supposed to be one of the most powerful barbarians in the lore. Lord Shurapak is a 20th level fighter, but he's also got 7 levels in Wizard and 3 in Rogue, which means he's basically a level 30, which is only really possible because he's got demigod status. There are some examples of lore characters with impressive feats though. Drizzt is the most famous level 20 character, and can move faster than the eye can track, has innate magical resistances and powers as a drow, and is one of the best melee combatants in D&D. Then you have Grandmaster Kain, who knows the Quaking Palm technique, which, when he hits you with it, lets him essentially decide when you're going to die. You could walk away from a fight with this dude, and he could just be sitting at home 2 days later and decide now is your time. In fact, this is almost what happens to Artemis Entreri when he's hit by it, but he manages to convince Kain to drop the effect after nicking him with his vampiric dagger. Speaking of, Kain was also able to hold Artemis's cursed blade without any side effect, like it was a paperweight. Imagine someone picking up Frostmourne from World of Warcraft and just not being corrupted by it. He also battled 3 dragons, 1 white and 2 red, and tricked them into using their breath attacks on each other as he dodged all the fire and frost, which severely wounded all 3. He really is him. For paladins, there's Gareth Dragonsbane, who is quite appropriate for this video as he thwarted the plans of Orcus. He wielded a Holy Avenger, and with his magical horn, he could summon barbarian spirits to his aid. This is an actual item you can get too. It's called the Horn of Valhalla. He helped defeat a powerful lich known as the Witch King Zengi, and travelled through multiple layers of the Abyss to steal Orcus's wand, and after being betrayed by Samaster, the leader of the Cult of the Dragon, and having his soul trapped in the Plane of Shadow, he returned and led his army to destroy an army of giants and orcs in his lands. Also, he was basically a part of the same adventuring group as Grandmaster Kain, but Kain was unable to be present for the Orcus wand heist. However, the old monk did land the killing blow against Zengi. Then for the fighters, there's King Azone IV, who is essentially a King Arthur-style character, being a heroic knight and legendary king who led armies into battle against overwhelming odds. More or less, this is what's expected of a level 20 fighter in D&D lore. But he also has some feats, as he managed to kill a red dragon great worm that was formerly an elf wizard. Though the battle did claim his life, going out and taking a red great worm with you, which is the oldest and most powerful age category of the most powerful chromatic dragon color, is a pretty decent feat. Storm Silverhand is technically a bard, as she's known as the Bard of Shadowdale, but her bardic abilities mostly extend to her being a really good singer and having a magical harp that can untie any knot, unlock any locks, and even disable things like Rugs of Smothering. Very useful item. But she's also a chosen of Mystra and is technically mostly a sorcerer, and she's immune to certain lightning magic, being able to instantly heal if struck by things like a lightning bolt or chain lightning. I will not go on forever, as I don't want the video to be over an hour long, although I know some of you would like to see that. I also did a fair bit of maths trying to work out exactly how strong some martial characters are mechanically, and trying to convert that into the lore. Now, if you've watched Dungeon Soup's Barbarian series, you already know how strong barbarians can get. It might be played up for comedic effect, but if you've played a level 20 barbarian in 5e, you know it's not too far from the truth. You can quite easily reach over 300 hit points, but with certain builds, you can exceed 400, possibly even 500, which means you are about as tanky as an ancient dragon or a kraken. And you're also able to resist physical damage and even magical damage with specific subclasses like a Bear Totem Barbarian, meaning you can basically double your HP, and therefore your effective HP against certain types of damage could be anywhere between 600 to 1000. Bear in mind that Tarrasque, the strongest monster in the monster manual, has just over 670 HP. A fighter, I worked out, can deal 48 damage with 4 attacks or 96 with action surge in one round. That's not including secondary damage like if he has a flame tongue or some oils of sharpness or a magical buff. Just a +3 longsword or +3 Vorpal sword in our fighter's case, and that's enough to kill creatures like trolls, ettins, and mind flayers and other mid-level creatures in one round, which is 6 seconds in Dungeons & Dragons. That's using action surge, of course, but as they now get 2 uses of that, they can do 16 attacks in 2 rounds, which lets them deal enough damage to take down fire giants and even something like an adult copper dragon in 12 seconds flat. Imagine a fire giant strolling towards your village, a far more deadly threat than anything from part 1 of this series, and a heroic knight comes flying in on a griffin or a dragon or some epic flying mount and deletes the giant in 12 seconds flat. Rogues can also do massive damage, getting over 100 damage in one round, if you let them utilize wyvern poisons on top of the 10d6 sneak attack they can do. Paladins can stack smites and can go toe-to-toe with storm giants. In fact, if a paladin wields a Holy Avenger, which they probably will at this level, just like Gareth Dragonsbane, and combine it with smites and a spell like Holy Weapon, they'll be outputting around 130 damage in 2 attacks. Not 2 rounds, 2 attacks. Bear in mind, our fighter was doing 96 in 8. And that 130 damage is almost enough to take out a 5th edition Lich in a single round, and almost enough to take out a Balor, one of the strongest demons of the Abyss, in 2 rounds. Now, the extra damage from a Holy Avenger requires you to be fighting undead or demons, but when I ran high-level D&D in my first campaign, I distinctly recall my Paladin player taking on 3 Death Knights at the same time, and he wasn't even level 20 yet. Of course, these numbers rely on all the attacks actually hitting, but with a +12 to hit on average for a level 20 character, and other ways to get even higher chances to hit, such as with optional flanking rules, surprise attacks, etc., I think it's reasonable to assume a level 20 will hit most of their attacks. And even if they don't, with over 200 HP for most martials if you have a good enough con score, you are more than strong enough to solo giants, some adult dragons, vampires, beholders, and powerful demons including Balors, and that's without additional buffs which you'll likely be getting. In fact, most of the magic items I've been giving out to our adventurers throughout this series have been deliberately pretty conservative and simple. Very often you might end up with magic items far more powerful than what I've mentioned in these videos. But of course, the real powerhouses are the wizards. Mordenkainen is the Archmage of Uearth from the Greyhawk setting. He was Gary Gygax's character and one of the first characters ever made for Dungeons & Dragons. He plays key roles across the multiverse, able to travel from plane to plane and world to world, even across settings. For example, he travels from his homeworld of Uearth in the Greyhawk setting to Faerun in the Forgotten Realms. He has greater spell resistance and an empowered version of mage armor that protects him from attacks. He can manipulate time and reality and can cast spells like Mordenkainen's Disjunction, which basically deletes magical effects in a certain area like a magical EMP, including anti-magic fields and possibly even artifacts. Of course, he also knows Wish. Tasha is another example of a level 20 plus wizard. She's the daughter of Baba Yaga and has captured and imprisoned multiple demon lords, most notably Frazur Blue, the demon lord of lies, and Grast, one of the big three demon lords who rivals Orcus and Demogorgon. In fact, her and Grast even had a bit of a fling, with the demon lord considering her almost as an equal. This means she alone is powerful enough to be regarded by some of the most powerful entities in the lore, and she is most well known as the Witch Queen, with most of her magical power being mental manipulation and dabbling in forbidden magics like those from the Abyss. She created the Demonomicon and has learned secrets from multiple demon lords and Baba Yaga. You also have Raistlin from the Dragonlance series, who's capable of time travel, and an alternate version of himself was capable of potentially surpassing the gods and destroying all life on the world of Krynn, though it is important to emphasize that this was an alternate version of himself, but it is kind of suggested that he was capable of the same level of feats. As for the most broken wizard of all time, Elminster. Now, he's one of the more well-known wizards, and is one of the strongest in Forgotten Realms lore. Now, there's a lot of things he can do as a chosen Amistra, including wielding spellfire magic, which allows him to basically cast cleric spells. However, the most notable and somewhat ridiculous feat he can do is something that potentially breaks the entire power scaling of Dungeons & Dragons. You see, canonically, he can visit Ed Greenwood, or Ed of the Greenwood, the creator of the Forgotten Realms on Earth. Now, he only does this to share stories and lore and have a cup of tea. However, the implications that a wizard can visit Earth and speak to the literal creators of D&D lore is absolutely insane. It's basically not just fourth wall breaking, but potential fourth wall manipulation. After all, he clearly has a means to teleport back to his home plane, so his magic still functions on Earth, meaning he could potentially go to Ed Greenwood or Wizards of the Coast and cast Suggestion or some other mental manipulation spell and get them to literally rewrite the lore in his favour. A wizard of his level could, theoretically, get Wizards of the Coast to write lore about how they're the only wizard in the D&D multiverse capable of 20th level spells or something insane, and how they're stronger than the gods, and how they're the most handsome wizard in all of reality. Theoretically, this means a wizard as strong as Elminster could go to Earth, visit Japan, take one look at Dragon Ball Super and see Goku unlocking Ultra Instinct and fighting Jiren, then go back to the writers of D&D lore and go, change the lore to make me more powerful than Goku. In fact, maybe there's a reason why Wizards of the Coast is named Wizards of the Coast. Perhaps secretly they are a sect of wizards from the Sword Coast who have planar travel to our reality. I mean, maybe Ed Greenwood is one of those wizards himself. He does look like one after all. In all seriousness though, without the fourth wall shattering, which may or may not actually genuinely be canon, apparently it is, but I don't think it's meant to be taken seriously. Wizards in Dungeons & Dragons typically are capable of lesser reality warping, time manipulation, and planar travel across the multiverse. They can go toe-to-toe with near-divine beings like demon lords and archdevils, and equivalent celestial entities like solars and empyreans, and so a level 20 plus wizard is about as much of an influence on the multiverse they inhabit as one of those aforementioned entities. Mordenkainen is just as much a part of the fabric of the lore in the multiverse of Dungeons & Dragons as someone like Orcus or Asmodeus or Lolth. And our humble level 20 wizard may well reach that level of power and fame. In fact, most of the known lore wizards, like Mordenkainen, as I said, were once player characters that made it to level 20. Now, one more thing to mention about level 20 characters, regardless of the class, it is possible that they will receive an epic boon when they reach level 20. Sometimes this is up to the DM discretion, mind you, but some of these boons are actually quite interesting in terms of how powerful they could be in the lore. You have boons like the boon of fate, which lets you manipulate your own fate. You have the boons of immortality and invincibility. One, of course, makes you immortal, and the other one allows you to take 0 damage from any source, only once per short rest, mind you, but you could potentially shrug off anything with this boon. A star could explode in your face, and you could potentially take 0 damage from that. You've got the boon of luck, where you manipulate your own luck. You have the boon of irresistible offense, where you can bypass the resistances of any creature. You have the boon of planar travel. And then you have the boon of perfect health, which might not be as powerful, but to someone like us commoners, having perfect health at all times is very, very powerful. And in this case, it makes you immune to diseases and poisons, which effectively kinda does make you immortal. There are many others, and for the most part, these boons typically in universe are granted by the gods or some equivalent entity, but they are worth noting, and I did nearly forget about them, but I did have a helpful commenter mention them. So, we've reached the end of Tier 4. Maybe your journey continues into the epic levels beyond level 20, or maybe it ends here. Most likely it probably ended back at level 7 according to the statistics. But what I have realised in making this series is that levels of power in D&D vary wildly from setting to setting, character to character, and class to class. Lore doesn't always line up with mechanics. But I think at the end of the day, D&D is just not meant to be power scaled. It's meant to encourage teamwork and heroic deeds, whether that is in the form of heroic knights taking down a fierce and tyrannical dragon, or characters as strong as storm giants cleaving their way through the abyss and fighting the demon lords themselves. The story is yours at the end of the day. The Lost Lore Scholar and I were talking about this, and he much prefers the Lord of the Rings style of campaign, where it remains that sort of low-level fantasy vibe, and to him a heroic deed from a level 20 fighter would be charging into an orc army and cutting down 10 or 15 orcs in a single battle. To me, as I've DM'd for high-level campaigns before, I like to imagine my characters at that level being practically demigods. When we revisited our level 20 characters from the first campaign I ran, my brother's paladin was so strong with his belt of storm giant strength that he was able to stop an airship from taking off by grabbing onto the rudder. Does that make any sense? No. Is it badass? Yes. My other friend's Dampier Ranger Rogue character causes a blood moon to happen every time she shows up just because it's awesome. And our Bugbear Artificer fighter quite literally has a droid army like from Star Wars. None of this makes a lot of sense, but the great thing about high-level D&D is it doesn't have to. If you want your characters to be heroic, like in Lord of the Rings, and down to earth, wielding very little magic and more relying on their own bravery and martial skill, great, because that's what old Dungeons and Dragons was very much like. That's why so many of these characters in the lore are like that. But at the same time, if you want to have demigods going around one-shotting dragons, go for it. In fact, I'm going to go over the 12 core classes and give a reference from other media of how I like to imagine level 20 characters, either when I'm DMing for them, or if I ever get a chance to actually play in a campaign that reaches level 20. Barbarian, we've already gone over. Dungeon Soup. Fighter, you could be the lore-accurate Dragonborn, Samurai Jack, or, as I like to think, Lu Bu from Dynasty Warriors. In fact, most Dynasty Warriors characters would fit the bill of a level 20 fighter, I think, just wading through armies. Wizards are a strange one because, as I've kind of gone over, they can vary anything between Freerun and Doctor Strange. Now, Freerun, I think, actually represents a level 20 wizard really well in her verse, but I'm going to be controversial here. I actually think that a level 20 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons wizard is stronger than Freerun. Now, Frieren has better battle IQ and battle capabilities. She reacts to things faster, she can cast spells faster. You know, Dungeons & Dragons Wizards, you have to remember, there's one thing I have not mentioned in this entire series, and it is actually kind of a huge deal, but everyone ignores it in 5th edition, and that is spell components. Wizards cannot actually cast most of their spells unless they have the specific materials and components to do so. But we don't really see this in Frieren. She's able to just cast more like a mage than a wizard. However, at least so far in her series, now I haven't read the actual manga, I am mostly an anime watcher, but so far she hasn't displayed the ability to manipulate time. She hasn't displayed the ability to manipulate fate, which wizards can do. She hasn't displayed the ability to become ethereal or planar travel, which again, D&D wizards can do. So I think even though she's faster and has more destructive power than a level 20 wizard in D&D, I think level 20 wizards have more hacks and would potentially beat Frieren in a fight. The main difference, of course, would be Frieren has higher battle IQ because the average person playing a wizard in Dungeons & Dragons doesn't actually have half the level of intelligence as their character does. So they will sit there for 30 minutes because they've forgotten what their spell does. So they got to reread over the spell. Frieren's probably going to mop the floor with you. Monk, you're a backy character, right? You are pulling off bullshit level feats with invisible soup and turning your skeleton into a whip so that you can do a Mach punch. Warlock, you're basically Gul'dan from World of Warcraft. Paladin, you could say Tyrion Fordring or Alexandros Mograine, also from World of Warcraft, but I like to think Escanor from Seven Deadly Sins. Druid, Malfurion Stormrage, conjuring tornadoes and turning people into trees. Sorcerer, you are basically Aang at the end of Last Airbender, when he's fighting the Fire Lord. Cleric, I'm not really sure. Jesus, I suppose. Rogue, Speeder Sound Sonic from One Punch Man. Ranger was a very difficult one to think of, because there's not actually that many examples of what I imagine as a level 20 ranger in media. Aragorn, of course, is a very, very famous example of a ranger, possibly the most famous example of a ranger, but I don't consider him to be level 20. Now, if you go for the low fantasy vibes campaign, then Aragorn would be a level 20. Geralt, same sort of thing. I don't consider him to be on par with a level 20 D&D character, but some people might. However, my choice for the ranger is the Hunter from Bloodborne. And then finally, Bard. Honestly, I don't know, Freddie Mercury. Whatever style you choose, the average commoner is gonna be in awe either of your sheer aura and power or your heroic deeds. Your character to them could be like witnessing a demigod, or it could be like meeting Taylor Swift. It could be like seeing a lore-accurate dragonborn one-shotting a dragon and sending it flying across the map, or it could be like meeting a top general and battlefield tactician that led an army to an incredible victory and thus saved your homeland. It's your deeds that define you, not necessarily your power. Monsters, however, are a different story. How strong is an ogre compared to the average dude? How powerful is a storm giant? What is an ancient dragon capable of? And why is the Tarrasque the mightiest monster of the material plane? And how does it fare when compared to entities of other planes? Well, my next series, How Powerful Are D&D Monsters, will be going over those questions as I cover CRs 0 to 30. Thank you once again for watching. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. And I do genuinely appreciate the support that you have shown for this series. I'll see you around.